addressing the problems of poverty and hunger through open-sourced GM foods. So before we explain what that means, we're going to overview the problems of poverty and hunger.
So our group's problem is poverty, and we believe that poverty has a direct relationship to nutrition, health, and education. And we conclude that poverty is the strategic connection to education, health, and nutrition. And a solution to poverty will also alleviate all these other problems.
So the first issue we looked at was nutrition. So as you can see, malnutrition is very prevalent worldwide, and we found that poverty and nutrition are mutually reinforcing. So poverty causes nutrition and malnutrition in that people who don't have the funds to acquire sufficiently abundant or nutritious foods will end up not having enough to eat or not having healthy enough foods to eat. But the causation is the other way as well, because those who are malnourished suffer from a variety of health problems, and also they have trouble concentrating, and mostly it just affects their ability to access the labor market, which is how most people raise themselves out of poverty.
So studies show that people living in poverty are exposed to many health risk factors, and these health risk factors can cause many physical or mental health problems, and they can be detrimental to people's lives. And one common example of physical health problem that people living in poverty face is undergrowth, and schizophrenia is one of the common mental health problems. And because these people have lack of access to healthcare, or sometimes not at all, they're caught in this vicious cycle of poverty from generation to generation.
So in addition to the connections between poverty, health, and nutrition, there is also a strong correlation between poverty and education. Our research has indicated a performance level gap between students from high-income and low-income families, and this is due to factors such as exposure to stress, perhaps poor health, lack of resources and access to preschool, and possible movement in and out of schools. And all of these inhibit a student's ability to profit from school, and therefore may impact their ability to participate fully in the workforce in the future. So overall, our research indicates that poverty is a widespread problem affecting many areas of people's lives. Therefore, a solution to alleviate poverty will also benefit these other areas.
So we believe that agriculture is one of the key sector of economy, and by improving agriculture, we hope to improve and boost economy as well. And by focusing on agriculture, there can be higher production of foods, and which results in increasing accessibility of foods and vegetables for everyone.
So there are currently many issues surrounding agriculture. One of them is climate change. So climate change is continually affecting our environment, including the land available for agriculture. In addition, there is currently a strong reliance on pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers, which are not good for our health, nor are they healthy for our environment. And in the area of GM foods cause many intellectual property disputes, which affects the accessibility of information about GM foods and their development. And this is related to how there is limited knowledge about the long-term effects of GM foods on our health.
So to address these concerns about agriculture, we have looked at the open source model. So open source is the system of having software openly accessed to the public for free use and free improvement, and those improvements are given back to the open source community. So programs such as Linux and OpenOffice, anyone can use these programs for free, and any programmer can look at the source code to understand more about it and also make improvements and give them back to the community. So these programs continuously develop through collaboration and complete transparency. So we also looked at open access journals such as arXiv, where academics can post their academic articles for free, and they'll be published for free access by anyone who wants to, any member of the public or other academics. And these are becoming increasingly popular. So we decided to use this model for GM foods, using kind of the DNA of GM foods as sort of like the source code for life. So our suggestion is that we have GM strains, which are currently controlled mostly by corporations, to have open access so anyone who wants to view those genetic strains can, and anyone who wants to make improvements can. So we're going to go more detail into that. But first, there's a lot of misconceptions about GM foods, a lot of mistrust. The picture here is the golden rice, And this is an example of GM foods used for humanitarian benefit.
So golden rice is a project that is currently in development, and it is a strain of rice that has been genetically engineered to contain beta-carotene, which is the precursor to vitamin A. And this rice is designed to be distributed to areas of the world where there is a large vitamin A deficiency. So this project shows the potential of GM foods to contain other nutrients and vitamins that can help improve the health of people around the world.
So potential benefits of GM foods. Compared to normal crops, they can be genetically modified to be much more nutritious. And because they can grow much faster than normal crops, like I said before, there can be higher production of foods and increasing accessibility of foods. And GM foods can be much more resistant to drought and harsh weather. So GM foods can be necessary for the upcoming possible climate change. And lastly, they can be genetically modified to be less dependent on pesticides, so they can be much more ecological friendly than normal crops right now.
So, wait, 1 second. So pictured here is the Sunup papaya variety. So this is another example of how GM foods have been used probably for good. So in Hawaii, the papaya industry is quite large, and the ring spot virus was killing most of the papaya production there. And through the introduction of this Sunup papaya that was resistant to this ring spot virus, it saved the Hawaiian papaya industry, and currently 80% of Hawaiian papayas are this genetically modified variety. And currently we have no other means of protecting against ring spot virus using pesticides or any other means besides this genetically modified resistance. So clearly in this case, the economy was helped, and also there's more abundance of healthy fruit. Healthy as far as we know. So OpenGM will accomplish its goals through this three-pronged approach. So first, we're going to offer an open access database of biotechnological articles. So that means articles about genetic engineering as well as safety and environmental effects, because currently the long-term safety and environmental effects are not well understood. And we'll also offer a database of GM strains, so anyone can look and see the genetic codes of the GM strains in our database. But the analogy breaks down a little bit here because so we need physical seeds to plant these plants. You can't just have the source code of the DNA. So we would also offer a database of seeds at cost to be purchased by farmers or nonprofit organizations that want to give these seeds out. So we would also offer a legal framework for this open source model. So currently in open source software, they use copyleft patenting, which can be seen by this left-facing C, which means anyone who uses the material will have and makes improvements cannot use those improvements and sell them. They have to give them back to the open source community. So in this way, we'd ensure that people who are using our resources would give back to our community with any improvements that they make. So in this way, our information will continuously grow. And thirdly, we'll offer funding for the development of new GM strains, because this is expensive and time-consuming. So we need to, and this is under the condition that they offer their strains to our database. So this provides an incentive for people wanting to use our system instead of. So this could be economically scalable to any size, because the more funding for GM development would be, the better. The first 2 points would we expect to be relatively low costs. So we hope to have partnerships with major research organizations so that we can continue to get funding for developing of new GM strains.
So how is OpenGM going to help break the poverty cycle? So as mentioned before, we will encourage the development of GM foods that produce better yields, therefore increasing supply and again increasing accessibility to these nutritious foods. And by encouraging the development of GM foods that contain nutrients and vitamins, we can help improve the health of people around the world and therefore increase one's ability to participate in the workforce as well as profit from school. So besides these humanitarian purposes, we are also benefiting the environment by creating GM foods that are less reliant on pesticides and fertilizers. And by doing so, we are increasing the efficiency of agriculture, which is again a huge driving force in the economy.
So we believe that these steps are necessary to take now because as the world's population increases and climate change and environmental degradation continue to make agriculture more difficult, to avoid widespread hunger and poverty, we need to have advances in agricultural technology, and GM foods is a way that we believe that this can be done.
Thank you.
Anyone have questions for Open GM?
It's like a database, kind of like Wikipedia, where anyone can edit any article. What kind of
Sorry. So it's not that anyone can edit any article. Anyone can access any article. So people can publish on it for free, but no one can edit each other's work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So building on that, what's to stop someone from taking like a perfectly fine strain, right, from your database? And what if they say like, oh, I want to change it to enhance something, and they make a little boo-boo, and then their food is no longer very healthy for anyone at all, but they don't really know that because maybe they're not the smartest at DNA mixing. And then couldn't they sell food that could really make someone potentially sick?
Yeah, so there would be the same FDA regulations as there would be for corporately controlled GM strains. And it's still difficult to genetically modify. It's not like any amateur can go ahead and do this. So people would not be able to purchase these GM strains without proper safety regulations.
So how do you first initiate, okay, so you're going to put the articles up there, but how do you get the initial strain, the first seed? Is Monsanto going to sell it to you?
So we're hoping that we can get Golden Rice and other humanitarian developed ones that are not made for profit to join our organization.
Oh, so there already exists GMs that are not controlled by corporations like Monsanto? There's
yeah.
not-for-profit GM producers?
There's a few.
Producers
it's
or
the
users?
majority. Sorry?
Producers or users? I know not-for-profits use, but what about actually producing the strain?
Well, yeah, so Golden Rice was developed by non-profit researchers. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Another question I have is, clearly there's a lot of profitability in GMs, because that's the big concern that the corporations and the biotech corporations controlling it, right?
Yeah.
Is that they're motivated by profit. So how does that profitability factor in? Do we just...
Well, with the development of open source GM strains, hopefully the profitability will decrease for the corporations, and there'll be an increase of government funding for new GM strains as this becomes apparent that it's very important to do. And hopefully economies will help benefit from this. Maybe not like specific ones like corporations, but overall.
Okay.
You mentioned that there were some concerns with GM foods, like their safety. Do you want to just highlight what those concerns are?
So currently, there's no evidence that GM foods have short-term health effects. But of course, it's hard to know long-term, and environments are can be very fragile. We can't predict exactly what could happen with them. So the reason Open GM will be helpful is that we can look at these problems more transparently instead of corporations having control over this information.
And going back to the mistrust that's surrounding GM foods, by having this open access database, we are hoping to eliminate that doubtfulness and that mistrust by making it all open source and accessible to the public, so that any concerns, they can go directly to the source and address it themselves.
We'll take one last question. Maybe Alex.
I found in my research that there are health effects that are associated to short-term testing of GM foods, and rats were tested by being fed like golden rice and GM corns, and they died unexpectedly and without any explanation. Have you researched the long-term effects, or like how would you implement GM foods without having long-term testing?
So there's definitely conflicting evidence, but currently a large portion of our foods are already GM, and for human consumption, GM foods haven't been found to have significant health effects. I'm not sure about this particular study, but So for a food to become toxic to humans, it would usually have to produce some sort of toxic molecule, which could be detected through testing. So I would think that if a rat was killed like very quickly, you could be told how the rat died. So I'm not, but the scientific consensus we're pretty sure is that the short-term health effects are not significant, and that's why they've been approved by FDA. And when there are problems, they sometimes are not approved by the FDA. Like currently, they're doing genetic testing on animals, genetically modified animals, and we're not going to go into that because there may be more problems associated with that than for crops.
Thank you.
Thank
GM.
you.